The first gunshot of the evening tore through the air just as Lilian Shaw collapsed in the dusty main street of Copper Creek, Arizona Territory, 1882. The spring fever that had swept through the frontier town had finally claimed its most determined victim, the stubborn young schoolteacher who'd insisted on staying upright until the very last child was safely home. Darkness engulfed Lilian as her body hit the ground, her consciousness slipping away as rapidly as the setting sun behind the distant mountains. The last thing she heard was the commotion of boots on wooden boardwalks and a deep voice commanding, "Stand back, give her air." For what seemed like eternity, Lilian drifted through landscapes of fever and hallucination. Sometimes she was back in Boston, walking through her father's grand library. Other times she was floating above Copper Creek, watching herself teach arithmetic to eager young faces. Most often, she was lost in a swirling desert, searching for water that remained forever out of reach. Through it all came fragments of the waking world, cool cloths on her forehead, bitter medicine on her tongue, and a voice steady and deep reading to her when the nightmares grew worst. "You'll make it through, Miss Shaw," the voice promised during her rare moments of half-consciousness. "You're stronger than this fever. Keep fighting." Inside the small doctor's office at the edge of town, Dr. Harold Monroe shook his head grimly as he looked down at the feverish schoolteacher. "It's not looking good, Ryker. This spring fever's already taken 3. She's been under for 5 days now." Ryker Daniels removed his hat and ran a hand through his dark hair, his usually confident demeanor replaced with quiet concern. "She's going to pull through. She has to." "You've barely left her side," Dr. Monroe observed. "Didn't realize you and the schoolteacher were close." "We aren't," Ryker admitted. "Not exactly." In truth, Ryker had exchanged fewer than 20 words with Miss Shaw since her arrival in Copper Creek 6 months ago. As the owner of the town's largest cattle operation, their paths rarely crossed, save for the occasional town meeting or Sunday service. Yet something about the passionate young woman with her Eastern education and fierce determination to bring knowledge to frontier children had caught his attention from the start. "Well, someone needs to stay with her tonight," the doctor said. "My wife's come down with it too, though thankfully milder. I need to be home." "I'll stay," Ryker said without hesitation. Night settled over Copper Creek like a heavy blanket. Ryker sat beside Lilian's bed, occasionally changing the cool cloth on her forehead as Dr. Monroe had instructed. Her pale face was flushed with fever, her chestnut hair spread across the pillow in tangled waves. On impulse, Ryker reached for the book on the bedside table, a collection of poetry he'd noticed her carrying on several occasions. He began to read aloud, his deep voice filling the small room with words of beauty and wonder that contrasted sharply with the harsh frontier world outside. In her fever dreams, Lilian wandered through a scorching desert. The sun beat down mercilessly, and her throat burned with thirst. Just as she was about to surrender to exhaustion, a cool stream appeared before her. But each time she approached, it vanished, reappearing farther away. Then something changed. A voice reached her, deep and steady, speaking of green valleys and snow-capped mountains. The desert around her began to transform, patches of grass sprouting beneath her feet, the scorching heat giving way to a gentle breeze. "Don't give up now, Miss Shaw," the voice urged. "Copper Creek needs you. Those children need you." Lilian turned toward the voice, and for the first time in days, she felt herself moving not deeper into delirium but toward consciousness. Ryker had nearly nodded off when he noticed a change in Lilian's breathing. He leaned forward, watching intently as her eyelids fluttered. "Miss Shaw," he whispered, hardly daring to hope. Her eyes opened, unfocused at first, then gradually sharpening as they settled on his face. "Water," she managed to whisper. Ryker quickly brought a cup to her lips, supporting her head as she drank. When she finished, he gently lowered her back to the pillow. "Mr. Daniels," confusion clouded her eyes. "What are you doing here, looking after you?" he said simply. "You've been very ill, Miss Shaw. The whole town's been worried." "How long?" Her voice was barely audible. "Almost 6 days now." She closed her eyes, processing this information. "The children are fine. Mrs. Holloway has been filling in at the schoolhouse." A weak smile touched her lips. "She always said she should have my job. No one could replace you, Miss Shaw." The sincerity in his voice made her eyes open again, searching his face with newfound curiosity. "I should fetch the doctor," Ryker said, suddenly uncomfortable under her gaze. "Wait," she whispered, her hand weakly reaching for his. "Your voice. I heard it through the darkness. You were reading to me." "I thought it might help," he admitted. "You seemed calmer when I did. It did help." "It brought me back." Her eyes drifted closed again. "Please don't stop." Ryker picked up the book and continued reading, his deep voice guiding Lilian into a healing sleep rather than the haunted unconsciousness of fever. By morning, Lilian's fever had broken. "Doctor." Monroe pronounced it a miracle, though he cautioned that her recovery would be slow. "She's weak as a newborn colt," he told Ryker. "She'll need care for a while yet." The problem became immediately apparent. The tiny room behind the schoolhouse where Lilian lived was no place for a woman recovering from a deadly fever. Copper Creek had no hospital, and the doctor's office was too small to serve as a long-term recovery room. "She needs proper care, good food, and quiet," Dr. Monroe insisted. "And I've got 3 more cases developing. She can come to my ranch," Ryker found himself saying. "I've got plenty of room, and Mrs. Peterson, my housekeeper, is a fine nurse." "That's mighty generous, but folks might talk," the doctor warned. "Let them." Ryker's jaw set stubbornly. "Unless you have a better suggestion." Later that day, Lilian found herself carefully loaded into Ryker's wagon, bundled in blankets against the spring air that still felt chilly to her fever-weakened body. "This isn't necessary," she protested feebly. "I can recover in my own quarters." "That drafty room with no proper stove?" "Not a chance," Ryker replied, adjusting the blankets around her. "Doctor's orders, Miss Shaw." The journey to Ryker's ranch took nearly an hour, during which Lilian drifted in and out of consciousness. When she awoke fully, she found herself being carried in strong arms up a set of wide wooden steps to an impressive 2-story ranch house. "Welcome to Silverhorn Ranch," Ryker said, noting her surprised expression. "Not what you expected from a cattle rancher. Indeed, it wasn't." The house was substantial and well-built, with wide verandas and large windows. Inside, the furnishings were solid and comfortable, not ostentatious but of unmistakable quality. Lilian was settled into a bright corner bedroom with windows that overlooked rolling grasslands and distant mountains. Mrs. Peterson, a kindly woman in her 50s with a no-nonsense attitude, immediately took charge of her care. "Mr. Daniels says you're to have the best of everything," the housekeeper informed her. "And I'm to call for the doctor at the first sign of the fever returning." "Mr. Daniels seems to have thought of everything," Lilian murmured, still bewildered by the cattle rancher's unexpected kindness. Over the next few days, Lilian slept more than she was awake, her body demanding rest to heal. When conscious, she was surprised to find Ryker often nearby, sometimes reading correspondence at a small desk brought into her room, other times simply sitting quietly by the window. "Don't you have a ranch to run?" she asked on the 4th morning, feeling stronger than she had since falling ill. He looked up from the ledger he was reviewing. "That's the advantage of having a good foreman. Tomas has things well in hand. Still, I can't imagine the owner of Silverhorn Ranch typically plays nursemaid to schoolteachers. A smile touched his lips. There's never been a schoolteacher like you in Copper Creek before. The simple statement carried a weight that made Lillian's cheeks flush with color that had nothing to do with fever. As days turned into a week, Lillian's strength gradually returned. She progressed from being barely able to sit up in bed to taking short walks around her room, and finally to joining Ryker for meals in the dining room downstairs. During this time, she discovered a side to Ryker Daniels that few in Copper Creek ever saw. Behind the successful, sometimes intimidating cattleman was a thoughtful man with a surprising love of literature, a dry wit, and a deep commitment to the land and people under his care. How did a man who can quote Shakespeare end up running cattle in Arizona Territory? She asked one evening as they sat on the veranda, watching the sunset paint the distant mountains in shades of gold and purple. Same way a Boston society daughter ended up teaching multiplication tables to Cowboy's children, I expect, he replied with a smile. Life takes unexpected turns. That's not an answer, Mr. Daniels. Ryker, he corrected. After saving your life, I think we're past formalities. Ryker, she conceded, and I'm Lilian. My father started this ranch 30 years ago, he explained. I was raised here, but my mother insisted I get an education. Sent me back east to her brother in Philadelphia. I attended university there. Yet you came back. This is home, he said simply. My father died my last year of university. Someone had to take over. Do you regret it? Lilian asked. The life you might have had. Ryker considered this, his gaze sweeping over the vast landscape before them. I thought I might once. Now, no, this land gets in your blood, and there's something honest about this work that I never found in city life. As April turned to May, Lillian's health improved steadily. The color returned to her cheeks, and her strength grew daily. With it came an increasing awareness that her extended stay at Silverhorn Ranch would soon need to end. Mrs. Holloway sent word that the children are asking when you'll return, Ryker mentioned one morning over breakfast. The town's starting to recover from the fever outbreak. I should go back soon, Lilian agreed, ignoring the unexpected pang the thought caused. I've imposed on your hospitality far too long already. You haven't imposed at all, he said quickly. In fact, he stopped, seeming to reconsider his words. That is, there's no rush. Dr. Monroe said you shouldn't return to teaching until you're fully recovered. Before Lilian could respond, the sound of approaching horses drew their attention. Moments later, Mrs. Peterson appeared at the doorway. Mr. Daniels, Sheriff Collins is here with another man, says it's urgent. Ryker excused himself, and Lilian watched through the window as he greeted the visitors. The conversation appeared tense, with the sheriff gesturing emphatically while the other man, a well-dressed stranger, stood stiffly aside. When Ryker returned nearly an hour later, his expression was troubled. Is everything all right? Lilian asked. He hesitated before answering. That was Harrison Reid, from the territorial governor's office. There's been some question about land boundaries between Silverhorn and the nearby reservation. What sort of question? The kind that could mean I lose the western section of my grazing land. Ryker's jaw tightened. Or that the Apache lose part of their reservation. Either way, someone suffers. But surely there are records, surveys, that's the problem. There are two different surveys with conflicting boundaries. He sighed heavily. I need to ride to Tucson tomorrow to present my case to the land office. How long will you be gone? At least a week, possibly longer. He looked at her with concern. I don't like leaving while you're still recovering. I'm much better, Lilian assured him. Mrs. Peterson has taken excellent care of me. Still, he paused, seeming to struggle with his words. I've grown accustomed to our conversations. As have I, she admitted softly. Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them, an acknowledgement of the quiet bond that had formed during these weeks of her recovery. Perhaps, Ryker said carefully, when I return, we might discuss your housing situation in town. That room behind the schoolhouse is hardly adequate. As a valued member of the community, you deserve better accommodations. That's very thoughtful, but I manage well enough. You nearly died, Lilian. The intensity in his voice surprised her, and I don't think I could bear it if he stopped, clearing his throat. Just promise you'll stay here until I return, for my peace of mind if nothing else. How could she refuse when he looked at her that way? I promise. The morning of Ryker's departure brought an unexpected flurry of activity to the ranch. Lilian watched from the veranda as he gave last-minute instructions to his foreman, checked his saddlebags, and conferred with Sheriff Collins, who had returned to accompany him part of the way. Just before mounting his horse, Ryker approached the veranda where Lilian stood. Mrs. Peterson has strict instructions to send for the doctor if you show any signs of relapse, he told her. I'll be fine, she assured him. You have more important matters to worry about. Few things are more important than your health, he replied earnestly. The sincerity in his eyes made her breath catch. Without thinking, she reached out to straighten his collar. Be safe, Ryker. He captured her hand, holding it briefly against his chest. I'll return as soon as I can. Lilian watched him ride away, a tall figure silhouetted against the morning sun, until he disappeared over the distant rise. The days of Ryker's absence stretched longer than Lilian had anticipated. She continued to regain her strength, taking increasingly lengthy walks around the ranch grounds and even riding a gentle mare that Tomas, the foreman, selected especially for her. Boss would have my hide if anything happened to you, he explained with a knowing smile that made Lilian blush. Was it so obvious to everyone, the growing affection between herself and Ryker? And what exactly was that affection? Gratitude on her part, concern on his, or something deeper that neither had fully acknowledged? On the 9th day after Ryker's departure, Lilian was sitting in the garden with a book when Mrs. Peterson hurried out to her. Ryder's coming, the housekeeper announced. Looks like trouble. Moments later, 3 men galloped into the ranch yard. Lilian recognized one as Jake Wilson, who worked at the general store in Copper Creek. Miss Shaw, he called, seeing her on the veranda. Thank the Lord you're here. There's been an accident on the South Road. Stagecoach overturned at Rattlesnake Pass. Several injured, including children. Lilian was already on her feet. Has Dr. Monroe been notified? He's there now, but he needs help. Asked for anyone with nursing experience. Wilson looked desperate. Mrs. Peterson's name was mentioned, and yours too, Miss Shaw. Doctor knows you helped during that influenza outbreak back east. Lilian turned to the housekeeper. We should go. Mrs. Peterson nodded firmly. I'll gather supplies. Within 20 minutes, they were in the ranch wagon, heading toward Rattlesnake Pass. The overturned stagecoach came into view as they rounded a bend in the road, a shocking sight with its splintered wood and scattered luggage. People moved about urgently, attending to those laid out on blankets on the ground. Dr. Monroe looked up with relief as Lilian and Mrs. Peterson approached. Thank God. We've got 6 injured, 2 critically. The next hours passed in a blur as Lilian helped tend to the wounded. A young mother with a broken arm, an elderly man with lacerations to his face and hands, 2 children with minor injuries but major fright. And most seriously, the driver with a head wound and a woman passenger with what appeared to be internal injuries. We need to get them to town, Dr. Monroe decided as the sun began to set. Miss Shaw, Can you accompany the most seriously injured in the first wagon? I'll follow with the others." As night fell, Lilian found herself back in Copper Creek, helping to establish a makeshift infirmary in the church. The entire town mobilized, men carrying cots, women bringing food and clean linens, children running messages between buildings. It was nearly dawn when the crisis finally stabilized. The stagecoach driver had regained consciousness, and while the female passenger remained critical, her condition had not worsened. "You should rest," Dr. Monroe told Lilian, noting her exhaustion. "You're still recovering yourself." "I'm fine," she insisted, though in truth her strength was flagging badly. "Miss Shaw." The doctor's tone became stern. "As your physician, I'm ordering you to get some sleep. You've done more than enough." Reluctantly, Lilian allowed herself to be escorted to the hotel, where a room had been prepared for her. She fell into a deep sleep almost instantly, her dreams filled with jumbled images of the accident scene intermingled with memories of her own illness. She awoke disoriented, the room unfamiliar in the late afternoon light. For a moment, panic seized her. Where was Ryker? Then reality returned. She was in the Copper Creek Hotel, not at Silverhorn Ranch. A soft knock at the door preceded the entrance of Mrs. Holloway, the temporary schoolteacher. "You're awake. How are you feeling, dear?" "Much better, thank you," Lilian replied, sitting up. "How are the accident victims?" "Improving, thanks to your help. That poor driver is sitting up and taking broth now." Relief flooded through Lilian. "And the woman, the one with internal injuries?" Mrs. Holloway's face sobered. "Still very weak, but Dr. Monroe thinks she'll pull through." After washing and changing into clean clothes provided by one of the townswomen, Lilian made her way back to the church-turned-infirmary. "Doctor." Monroe looked up from changing a bandage, his expression shifting from welcome to concern. "You're still pale, Miss Shaw. Perhaps another day of rest would be wise." "I've rested enough," she insisted. "How can I help?" For the next 2 days, Lilian divided her time between assisting with the accident victims and checking on her students, who visited the hotel in small groups, eager to see their teacher again. Their bright faces and excited chatter about their lessons warmed her heart, reminding her of why she'd chosen this life on the frontier. On the evening of the 3rd day in town, Lilian sat on the hotel's small balcony, watching the sunset and thinking of Silverhorn Ranch. She missed the peace of the place, the sweeping vistas and its owner more than she cared to admit. "Miss Shaw." The familiar deep voice nearly made her heart stop. Turning quickly, she found Ryker standing in the doorway, hat in hand, trail dust still on his clothes. "Ryker." She rose, unable to keep the joy from her voice. "You're back. Rode straight here when I heard about the accident." His eyes searched her face. "Are you all right? They said you've been helping with the injured." "I'm fine, truly." He moved closer, his gaze never leaving hers. "When I heard what happened, that you'd come to help, I was proud and terrified. Terrified. That you'd pushed yourself too hard, that the fever might return." His voice dropped lower. "That I might lose you before I ever really had you." Lilian's breath caught. "Ryker, let me speak, please," he said urgently. "I've had a lot of time to think during that ride to Tucson and back, about what matters, about what I want." He took her hands in his. "I went to that land office ready to fight for every acre of Silverhorn, and then I realized something. Land, cattle, they're just possessions. But you, Lilian." He shook his head, seemingly amazed by his own realization. "You're irreplaceable." "What are you saying?" she whispered, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. "I'm saying that I love you. That I think I started falling in love with you the first time I saw you stand up at the town meeting and demand better books for your students. That during those weeks of your recovery, watching you fight back from the edge of death, my admiration turned to something deeper. Lilian's eyes filled with tears. I never thought a man like you. A rough cattleman, he smiled slightly. No, a man of substance, of dreams and vision. She squeezed his hands. I love you too, Ryker. Your voice brought me back from the darkness. And every day since has only made my feelings stronger. He drew her into his arms then, his lips finding hers in a kiss that spoke of relief, of homecoming, of promise. When they finally parted, Ryker pressed his forehead to hers. Come back to Silverhorn with me, not as a guest this time. Are you proposing, Mr. Daniels? Her eyes sparkled despite her attempt at seriousness. Inelegantly, perhaps, he admitted with a chuckle. I had planned something more romantic. Dinner, moonlight, perhaps that poetry you're so fond of. This is perfect, she assured him, touching his cheek gently. But there's the school to consider. My students will work it out, he promised. The ranch isn't that far from town, or we could build a new schoolhouse closer to Silverhorn. His eyes lit with sudden inspiration. In fact, that disputed land, what if we proposed using it for a new school? A place where both settler and Apache children could learn together. Lilian stared at him in wonder. That's revolutionary, is it? Or just common sense, he smiled. It would need a special kind of teacher, though. Someone with courage and vision. I can think of one who might be interested, she replied with an answering smile. So, Miss Shaw, Ryker said formally, though his eyes danced with happiness, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Of helping me build not just a ranch but a future that matters? Yes, she answered simply. With all my heart, yes. Spring turned to summer, and Copper Creek buzzed with the news of the upcoming wedding between the town's schoolteacher and its most prominent rancher. The new schoolhouse project on the formerly disputed land was progressing rapidly, with unexpected support from both the territorial government and the Apache leaders. On a perfect June evening, with the desert in bloom and the mountains glowing gold in the sunset, Lilian Shaw and Ryker Daniels exchanged vows under an arch of wildflowers at Silverhorn Ranch. The entire town turned out for the celebration, along with neighbors from distant ranches and representatives from the reservation. As twilight deepened into night, lanterns were lit around the dance area, and music filled the air. Ryker led his bride in their first dance, holding her close as they moved under the stars. Happy, Mrs. Daniels, he murmured against her ear. Completely, she assured him, her eyes reflecting the lantern light. Though I still can't believe how it all began with a fever that nearly took my life. And a voice that brought you back, he reminded her, your voice. She rested her head against his shoulder. It will always guide me home. As the music played on and well-wishers surrounded them, Lilian and Ryker shared a private smile, two souls who had found each other against all odds, ready to write the next chapter of their story together in the wild beauty of the Arizona territory. In the years that followed, Silverhorn Ranch flourished, as did the school that became known across the territory for its progressive approach to education. Lilian continued teaching, even after the arrival of their first child, bringing new ideas and books to the frontier children, while Ryker's fair business practices and innovative ranching methods earned him respect throughout the region. They never forgot how their love story began in fever and dreams, and with a voice that refused to let go, and each night, no matter how busy their days had been, Ryker would read aloud to Lilian as they sat on the veranda, watching the sunset paint the land they both loved in shades of gold and promise.